So today we're going to continue talking about unit rates and how to find a unit rate, but we're going to be working with numbers that are fractions or rational numbers. Okay, so I want to keep that vocabulary fresh. Rational numbers are any number that can be represented as a fraction. So that includes 0, that includes all your whole numbers because you could make them a fraction, put them over 1. So that includes most decimals because we can turn those into fractions if we wanted to. The only decimals that are not included in this are numbers like pi that go on forever and they don't repeat. Because remember we studied repeated decimals that we can turn those into fractions. Now it's been a while, but we did study how you could turn them into fractions if you needed to. But there are some decimals that go on forever that don't repeat that you actually can't turn into fractions. And those are not rational numbers. But for the sake of today, all of these are going to be fractions, so those are considered rational numbers. So this is now kind of taking it up to a 7th grade level. So unit rates in general are more of a 6th grade topic, but unit rates involving rational numbers now makes it a 7th grade level question. Okay, so this looks very similar to what we did yesterday. We're just going to be setting up a ratio. Now we talked about there's 2 different ratios for each one, and then we're going to find the given unit rate. And so there's 2 different unit rates for each comparison. We can either have miles per hour or we can have hours per mile. And depending on what we're looking for, depending how we're using the information, one may be better than the other. But for today, I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm looking for so we can practice setting these up in a certain fashion. So as we look at number 1, we've got a quarter of a mile walked in half an hour. And so we're going to set up a ratio here. Now you could do 1/4 compared to 1/2. Or you could do 1/2 compared to 1/4. And when we divide those and we get a unit rate, they give us a different answer because we've changed the order. So we can't just randomly throw them however we want. We got to think about what information are we looking for. So in this specific case, I've ordered it as miles per hour. Just a reminder, per means 1. So this is how many miles would this person go in 1 hour. Now if you just look at it, a quarter of a mile in half an hour, you could just kind of think about it. If it's half an hour, then you would double it to get to 1 hour. So if we just double 1/4, that's 2/4, which we would simplify to 1/2. So this should come out to 1/2. Now, the numbers are not always going to be that easy, but that's where we're going with this. So if it takes a quarter of a mile, if you go a quarter of a mile in half an hour, if that's how long it takes, that means you could go 2/4 of a mile in a whole hour. So 1/4 of a mile plus another 1/4 of a mile is 2/4. So that's a half. But we're not going to do all that mentally. It's possible, but that's not how we're going to do it. We're going to set up a ratio and we're just simply going to divide. So when I set up my ratio, I'm not even going to involve my numbers. I'm going to set up my ratio using my units. If I want miles per hour, I'm going to set it up in that order. Miles, consider your colon, your per, and then hour. So miles per hour. Basically, whichever one you want to get down to 1 hour, has to go second. So whatever you put second is what's going to be represented as 1 whole. Now, we got a quarter of a mile, so I'm going to throw that number in now. And I got half an hour. So notice in this one, they were given in the order that we actually ended up putting them in here, but it's not always going to be the case. So you can't just grab the numbers and throw them there. You have to think about what's the unit rate that I'm going for. So we talked about we're going to divide these 2 numbers to get this. So let's pretend we don't have a calculator and we're dividing 1/4 by 1/2. Remember we just KFC. Keep flip change. So we keep it and we're going to flip this one. And we're going to change it to multiplication. So it's very simple. All you do is take the second fraction when you're trying to divide, you flip it, and you multiply. So 1 times 2 is 2. 4 times 1 is 4. So 2/4 gives us the 1/2 that we were talking about. Okay, so simple. We don't even need a calculator to do this. Now I'm just going to tell you ahead of time, these are the types of questions that you're going to see on the M step, and they're not going to provide a calculator for you in that section. So we do need to make sure that we remember how to divide fractions. It's very simple. Just flip it and multiply. So let's look at number 2. Now in this case, both numbers are the same. So we know we're going to have 3/4 compared to 3/4. Okay, so we still are going to talk about the setup here. But in this case, even if you kind of had it backwards, it doesn't really matter because they're both 3/4. So if we want miles per hour again, so how many miles for 1 hour? I'm going to put miles first. I'm going to put hours second. In this case, they're both 3/4. Okay, so I'm going to be dividing 3/4 by 3/4. All right, and I do expect you to show this work. So you're going to show the division. You're going to show me that this equals 3/4 times 4/3. So again, all I did was flip the second one, change it to multiplication. You multiply across 12 and 12. Anything over itself is 1. So this is 1 mile per hour. And that should make sense if you think about it. This is 3/4 of a mile and 3/4 of an hour. So if you've gone this many miles in the same amount of time, it's always going to be equal to each other. So if we want to know how much for 1, it's going to be 1. All right, number 3. 1/4 of an hour, we get 1/8 inches of snow. So we want how many inches are falling per hour, or in 1 hour. How many inches of snow are we going to get? Again, easy enough numbers. You could kind of sit here and do this in your head. If it's only 1/4 of an hour, that means you're going to take 4 of those. So if it's 1/8 of an inch in that 1/4, you just times this by 4. So that's 4/8. 4/8 simplifies down to 1/2. So this can be done mentally, but we want to practice this for the times that it's not so easy. So we want inches per hour. If we did it the other way around, we'd get hours per inch. How many hours does it take to get 1 inch? Which is useful information. But in this case, we want to know how many inches do we get in 1 hour. So the order matters here. Inches per hour. That's how you set it up. So the inches is 1/8, and the hours is 1/4. Now if you notice, this was given to me as 1/4 first. So if you did 1/4 divided by 1/8, you'd get the answer incorrect for what we're looking for. That would have given you how many hours per inch. How many hours for 1 inch? We don't want that. We want how many inches for 1 hour. So we're going to do 1/8 divided by 1/4. So we're going to rewrite it as 1/8 times 4/1, which is 4/8, which is 1/2, which is what we got. I'm going to do one more with you and then let you try a couple here. So 1/2 cup of flour for every 1/3 cups of sugar. Okay, so that's a ratio right there that you would use in your baking or something like that. So we want to know how many cups of sugar per cup of flour. So how many cups of sugar do I need for every 1 cup of flour? So when I set this up, it's going to be sugar compared to flour, because I want cups of sugar per cups of flour. So cups of sugar per cups of flour. So now I got to go grab the right numbers and put them in the right spot. So sugar must come first for this unit rate. So I'm going to put the 1/3, and then flour comes second, and that's the 1/2. Once you have these set up, they're super easy to multiply and divide. Okay, I haven't chosen difficult numbers, and that's on purpose. The setup, though, that's where we have to really focus our attention, because once we have it set up right, it's easy. So we're just dividing here to find out how much for 1. So it's 1/3 divided by 1/2. Flip it and multiply, so 1/3 times 2/1. And we're going to get 2/3. So you're going to use 2/3 of a cup of sugar for every 1 cup of flour. So if all you had was 1 cup of flour, you would need 2/3 of a cup of sugar to match that and keep this proportion the same. All right, I'm going to pause the screen and work these out. And I want you to be working at the same time. In about a minute or two, I will show the information and you can see how you did. So trying 5 and 6. Okay, and then you're going to check yours against mine. Okay, so looking over this one, hopefully you've already done it. If not, pause the video and try it. But I want to know how many pies are eaten in 1 week. So pies eaten per week. So I have to set my ratio up in that order. Pies, then weeks. Pies per week. So I'm going to take the pies first, which is my 1/5, compare it to 2/7, divide. So I'm going to change division into multiplication. You flip this to 7/2, multiply straight across, and it's 7/10. So 7/10 of a pie is eaten in 1 week at this same rate. If you haven't tried number 6 yet, pause the video, try it, and then compare it to my answer. Okay, so checking your answers now. When I set this up, I decided, based on this information, to put pencils first and then days because it said pencils per day. So how many pencils are used in one day? So I'm going to take the pencils and divide it by the days. So I matched up the information. 3/4 goes with pencil, and then half goes with the day. So if 3/4 of a pencil is used up after half a day, how many pencils are you going to go through in one day? So all you have to do is divide in this order. So 3/4 divided by 1/2. So I flip, multiply, get 6/4, which divide by 2, you get 3/2. And now just in everyday life, you're not going to say, well, I use 3/2 of a pencil. You're going to talk about 1.5 pencils. So 2 goes into 3 one time, and then there's a half left over. So instead of leaving it as an improper fraction, since we're talking about something that it doesn't really make sense to express as 3/2, we're going to simplify it down to a mixed number and say that there's 1.5 pencils used per day. That's it for the notes today. Your homework for tonight's on the back. You can go ahead and get started. This stuff's not on it. We'll jump back into our rational numbers tomorrow.